together for a little over a year when his dad, Harry, had a stroke. I had never met Scott's parents. They lived in Richmond, Virginia. I live in Los Angeles. But Scott had told me that when he was a little boy, he remembered his dad using a particular word when referring to the black people that worked for him. A word that even then hurt and confused him. You know what word I'm talking about. So Scott was on the next plane, but I decided I was just fine if I never met this racist man, so I chose to stay put. But a couple weeks later, he called me, and he had this desperation in his voice. They don't know how much longer he has. Can you please come? I had never been to Richmond before. I was glued to the window of the cab that picked me up from the airport. Oh, so this is Richmond, land of Thomas Jefferson, home of big tobacco and Confederate statues. Scotty meets me in the lobby of the hospital, and as we're riding up together in the elevator to the ICU, he tells me that he and his mom, Nancy, hadn't yet had a chance to tell Harry about me. And I'm like, you mean you didn't tell him your girlfriend was coming all the way from LA today to meet him? He said, yeah, we told him my girlfriend was coming. We just didn't get around to telling him that you're black yet. So we get off the elevator, he kisses me, he holds my hand, he says it'll be fine, he'll love you. Mom and I are gonna go in and break the news, and then I'll come back out here and get you. Just wait right here. Break the news, great. So I'm in this waiting room, I'm all by myself, I'm pacing back and forth, my heart starts pounding, my mouth is dry, I'm like, why didn't I stop for water? What if this is a huge mistake? What if Harry is so angry about my being black that he has another stroke? Just then this black woman appears at the door, like on cue, and then she's immediately followed by what must have been her entire family. Most of them are crying, a couple of the younger ones are laughing. One large woman is giving orders, and no one looks at me. They just keep filing in, and I'm just sitting there like a fly on the wall. And then Scott appears in the doorway. And I just sit there and drink him in for a moment because he's blonde and tan and handsome, and he looks so vulnerable, and he looks so scared, and he looks so confused. He doesn't know where I am. This black family has filled in every inch of space around me, and he has no idea where I actually am in this room. And I watch his increasingly panicked expression as he scans the waiting room back and forth looking for me, and I laugh as I picture him thinking, which one is mine? So I get up and wave, and he smiles with relief, and he asks me if I'm ready, and I'm like, yeah. So we go into the ICU, and I see his mom, Nancy, standing in front of one of the units. And I know it's her because he told me that she has MS and uses a small 3-wheeled walker to get around. And when I get close to her, she reaches out and gives me this hug. And it's this long, emotional hug. Not at all what I expected. And she says in this soft, fluttery Southern accent, he's ready to meet you, Laura. Only 2 at a time. We have 1 hour left till visiting time's over. So I take a deep breath, and I step into the hospital room. And then I turn, and I see Harry, and I exhale. There's this small, frail-looking man with Scotty's blue eyes. And I'm like, oh my God. And Scott grabs my hand and walks me around to the side, and he says, here she is, Dad. This is Laura. And he walked me around to his good side because Harry's stroke had paralyzed him completely on his left side, and he couldn't talk, so he had a trach to help him breathe. And I said, hi, I'm so glad to finally meet you. And his eyes are really intense, and I can't read his expression, but suddenly his right hand springs to life, and it shimmies across this thin hospital blanket and grabs my hand. And he looks at Scott deliberately, and he mouths the word, beautiful. And then he looks back at me and kisses the back of my hand with tremendous effort and mouths the word, beautiful, again. Well, I'm crying now, just crying full out. Scott's crying. Harry has tears streaming down his cheeks. Nancy's broken the 2 at a time rule, and she's come in and she's crying too. And we all sit there, and Harry motions for me to sit on the bed with him next to him, and he doesn't let go of my hand. And we're like that for an hour, just talking, the 4 of us. Well, the three of us. He was nodding and listening, and the ICU nurse comes in and tells us it's time to go, and I'm sitting there and I recall the last line of that sign that I saw when I landed that morning. You can keep the change. Did I talk about that sign? No. Okay, so there was a sign that I saw when I landed. There was this crazy yellow pickup truck with a hand-painted sign in the back. And the sign said, give me my guns, my money, and my freedom. You can keep the change. And that was my introduction to Richmond. So I'm sitting there on the bed, and I'm thinking about the sign that I saw when I landed that morning, the last line of which was, you can keep the change. And it occurs to me that I had inwardly accused Harry of being prejudiced. But it was really I who had prejudged him for this hurtful word that he used almost 30 years ago. And the moment I walked into that hospital room, everything I thought about him previously flew out the window. This small, dying man with Scotty's blue eyes was willing to embrace me, full stop. So change wasn't just some liberal ideal. Real change was lying right there in that hospital bed in front of me. And if Harry could make that kind of change, then so could I. Thank you.